So, greetings. This is another one of the hands-on tarot card workshops. I think I wanted to start off the instruction about the handouts. These are up on the churchoflight.tv site under the current class for last week's class. So the handouts will remain the same for the portions that I'm teaching. I call this the tarot cheat sheet because basically what we have here in 78 rectangles are the keywords for each of the cards. And this is actually the information you need to memorize. Truly, the way that you will get good at doing readings is by doing readings. There isn't another way to get good at doing readings. But you actually have to sit down and practice, and that's what this series of classes has been designed around, to just take you through that process of reading and practicing so that we're not so much focused in on tarot history and theory, but where we're going through the creative process. There is both an art and a science to this. And the science is the relationship of the tarot being the silver key and its relationship to the gold key, which is astrology, from which we draw a lot of the symbols, the vocabulary that we work with in doing tarot readings. There is also a certain degree of science, parapsychology, that is involved in the process of divination itself. But when we go to do a reading, we're either doing a cold reading or we're doing a reading where we actually have a specific question in mind. Even when we're doing a cold reading, we do have a question in mind. It's just a more general or vague question, which sounds something along the lines of what surrounds, and then you add on to that, what surrounds Laura for the next 12 months. Now the process in this, everyone works with a different type of ESP, but the focus of the Brotherhood of Light and the extrasensory development department, which was active in the 40s with the work of C.C. Zane and at that time Ed Doan, who had moved out from Florida to Los Angeles to work at Church of Light headquarters. And there was constant experimentation going on, as well as working with students around the country and around the world. And really what they learned over time is that there are three basic forms of extrasensory perception that are in prominent use. Mediumship, which produces some of the most spectacular results, which is used in shamanic religions and in religious traditions from around the world. But they also decided that there were certain dangers tied in with that it was a way of producing some pretty amazing phenomena, but it did have some dangers that it posed for the persons that used it repeatedly in terms of breaking down their personal will, sort of opening a window to the great unknown, which they did not always have control over opening and shutting. So in doing card readings, we're working with divination. And there are two other forms of ESP that function well with that. There is feeling extrasensory perception, which some people have very pronounced. It is the form of ESP that I have most pronounced, due to a conjunction and parallel of the moon and Neptune in the 7th house. I just soak it all in from other people. It has its disadvantages because, again, it is a form of ESP that is harder to switch on and off, and or when you are receiving disagreeable vibrations, information, moods, experiences, it's much harder to shut down or tune out of or switch your consciousness. One can develop doing that, but I always describe feeling extrasensory perception as watching a movie with the score playing. If you think about it, the score provides the emotional quality. I don't know if any of you have ever watched horror films don't fall high on my category of choices, but every once in a while I may be with somebody who wants to do that. And if you're out going to the movies, you have no control over the mute button. However, if in the privacy of your own home, you're watching a scary movie, you have the choice of either fast forwarding through certain things, or there is the mute button. And what I find is that intellectual ESP, or what Zane calls extension of consciousness, is very much like watching the movie with the mute button on, which means you are seeing the images. You are able to observe what's going on, but you're not sucked into it emotionally. Your own heartstrings are not being played by the score of the film. And that's the difference between the two forms of ESP. Now, any reader may use both forms in doing a reading, and I do. We have to use extension of consciousness in order to somewhat contact the information. You can do it with feeling ESP, sitting across from someone. You can, start feeling the pain in your lower back and ask them if they've had a sciatic problem. There are ways where you start to feel a resonance that's going on, but it can be uncomfortable to the reader. But one can go purely with feeling extrasensory perception, though what we try to train ourselves to do is to extend our consciousness and bring the information back in. And that is done through the process of the ritual of the Tarot. And the ritual of the Tarot is we need to set a mood. We have certain ritual elements. For example, I've brought this up from our basement, which is a white pine board, which one of our members, Neil Cantwell, has decorated with symbols of the Sphinx and the Brotherhood of Light symbol. I keep my cards in a box, something else he made that has the Brotherhood of Light symbol on it. It is ritualistic in a sense. These become the paraphernalia of doing a reading, and they work as much as over time they do build up character vibrations from the type of work that's being done. So when you whip them out, they immediately establish a mood. They have a tone tied in with them. Zane recommends laying cards out on a white pine board because most wood is receptive and pulls in vibrations. So repeatedly using this surface over time, that receptive vibration builds up, and it's a little bit like the tarmac at the airport. The planes come in. The information comes into that surface. However, your cards are also receptive. And when we're working with cards, these are we call it a divinatory instrument. There are any number of divinatory instruments. Runes, like tarot cards, they are a set of symbols that are tossed down. There's different methods, but basically the process is the reader is dialing in, and they're dialing in to the person they're reading. And they're dialing into their lifeline. And this is where the extension of consciousness comes in. I brought in a different set of cards tonight. These are very old Brotherhood of Light deck. This is one of the old decks on paper from the 1940s that I hand-colored probably 20 years ago. And they were black and white. They had the original printings had very sharp images. And so these are hand-colored, and I'm going to use them tonight and sort of talk about that. When the individual actually colors their own deck, you put part of your own vibration into that. Now I have certain clients who call this deck the old lady because her spine is a little wobbly and it takes some effort to work. But when I read, I will lay a silk out. Silk is a non-conductive fabric, and electricity and other vibrations do not pass through it easily. I might either do readings at home in my office on top of my desk, where I also do accounting and other activities, and I don't want my cards to pick up those vibrations, and you want something to shield the vibrations. So I might lay a silk down to prevent sort of a leaking of vibration into the reading. So this has set up the ritual. So scent can be important, but basically we're trying to create a mood that uplifts us, that creates a sense of spirituality, that gives us a strong desire for the truth. We determine our question, and this can be, again, what surrounds Michael for the next 12 months, or you can ask things that are very specific. You can ask something that can be answered by a yes or no spread, or you can use the 7-card spread, or any number of the spreads that are in the book that you find value from. The important thing in all of this is that it is a ritual. Part of the ritual is that it's supporting the reader to dial their consciousness in. When I lay down the cards, I lay them face down, and I turn them over from top to bottom. If you learned in a different tradition and you turn from left to right, then you want to consistently use that tradition. All of what this is it becomes automatic, and it allows you to maintain an extended state of consciousness. So basically, in extension of consciousness, what we're trying to do is move our awareness from our conscious mind, from our cerebral thinking, where it's generally engaged. But we have to shift out from that, and we develop our question. We develop a strong desire to know. We will go into a certain amount of rhythmic breathing because it electrifies the system, and it allows you to project your consciousness from its normal seat in your frontal lobe and out to the inner plane or into the inner plane, wherever it might be, to tap into the question you're asking about. While going through that process is when we're doing the shuffling and cutting of the cards. the more you do that, the more you will start to feel a vibration moving down along your arms and hands. One of the most useful things you can do is spend a little bit of time every day with your cards and just handle them. Whether you're riffling through them like this, turning them around, doing basic shuffling, but mentally projecting energy into them. It starts to build up the rapport between you and your divinatory tool. In the process of shuffling and cutting, the information that's been sought after is brought back in through consciousness. Sometimes you'll feel a chill at the base of your brain and moving down through your arms and hands and into the cards. You're not always going to feel that. And what we believe takes place in any type of divination is psychokinesis. Psycho coming from the Greek for mind and kinesis for movement. So the mind is moving matter. In this case, the only thing we're trying to move is to arrange this set of symbols into an order that when we turn them over, it starts to bring up information to the conscious mind. That's where we have to switch into this, memorized meanings. You have your vocabulary associated with the cards, and you also have symbols associated with the cards. So just for example's sake, I've laid out cards here tonight without really asking a question. But we're going to use this just as a tool or a teachable moment in terms of how the meanings of the cards might shift if different questions are asked. So let's say here, the question being asked is, what surrounds my health? And the first card we turn over, as everyone knows, also in this packet of paper, the third page down is the Magic 7 or Lucky 7 spread, which is based on 2 interlaced trines. So the first card becomes the past of the matter inquired about. We're asking about health. And that card is Arcanum 16 reversed. What we see here is a pyramid struck by lightning. There are 2 men, what looks like a priest and a commoner, falling from this. It's sort of a scene of destruction. And in this case, though, it's upside down. So the energy is sort of zipping out of the bottom here. Now, if we were to look at our cheat sheet, we might find out that the keywords for this are accident or catastrophe. In other decks, it's called the Tower. We call it the Lightning because the lightning is so prominent. But the image is pretty much the same in other decks. The architecture may be different. It's a piece of high architecture being struck by lightning from which people are falling. Well, with the Brotherhood of Light deck, we don't reverse the meanings when the card is reversed. But we sort of, I don't know, it's more like, are you in first gear or fourth gear? When they're right side up, they're in high gear. When they're reversed, the energy is lessened somewhat. But I might change the meaning slightly, because to me, when this is upside down, the energy is falling out of this. It's almost more like a funnel. Rather than energy from above that is striking, it's almost more like a funnel from which energy is being siphoned off. So I'll oftentimes look at it as something being drained. So if I was Going further into the symbolism, Zane associates this card with the energies of Mars, the mythological god of war. Mars, we know, if we're talking about health, what does Mars rule in the physical body? Any ideas? Excellent. Inflammations, fevers, injuries, accidents, cuts, contusions. Basically, if it ends with an itis, it's Mars. The parts of the body Mars governs are the muscles and sinews. So this leaves us open. If we're asking a question about health, then we're working off of those symbols. And we might ask someone, have you had been dealing with a fever recently? Or have you had recently some kind of, flu, accident, or surgery going on? And they might start to give you some feedback. The nature of the card being reversed like this, you might caution someone about dissipating their energy, that they've been going, and Mars also governs the adrenals. And if we live a too stressful of a life, we can start to burn out our adrenals. So the next card in this, showing the present, is the Three of Swords. And the Three of Swords is generally read as a separation or divorce. If you think about it, 3 is the number of union, companionship, marriage. And swords tend to bring problems. The inner meaning to this, I believe, is idealism, because it corresponds to the Virgo decanative of Capricorn, which is Delphinus, the dolphin in the sky. So we have 2 levels of meaning here. Either this person's health is being impacted by the stress of relationships, companionship, family members, their collegial or business life. Something's going on that's creating a level of stress. Or it could even be, if we think about relationships, our body is a series of relationships. Each of our organs functions individually, but they're interrelated to one another and interconnected through hormones. The future of the matter, it ain't looking so bright. We have the 8 of Swords here, is generally read as a loss of honor. Now, a loss of honor, who knows how that can really impact one's health? The inner meaning to this is experience. This is the Capricorn decanative of Virgo. And the constellation is Hercules. And we can go to the esoteric or inner meaning sometimes to seek out information. In this case, we know Hercules, was the great laborer who had his 12 labors he had to fulfill. So the key word for this being experience, each of these 12 labors represent the different experiences Hercules underwent. So in talking about this person's health, we might say that it looks like you've really had some problems. It's tied into being really stressed out and the fact that you may have a lot of people around you that are pulling on your energy or demanding things from you. You might be able to gain something from the experience with your health, whether it's having to lie low, having to take care of yourself. One of the basic laws for anyone who might be in a caregiving profession is you have to take care of yourself to be able to take care of others. If you haven't taken care of yourself, there's nothing left to give. But we can see here the future shows that whatever's going on with this ailment may not be over yet. The future shows that there could be a resurgence of some kind. So what we do now, we've done the upper trine of past, present, and future. We're looking from above how things are affected. This is looking at the lifeline of the individual. Now we're looking from below. What can the individual do about it? So to me, this is the power card in the reading. And the Six of Coins is usually read as a social event. This is the Libra decanate of Aquarius, which is pictured in the heavens by the great sea monster Cetus. The inner meaning to this is repression. And that is certainly something we'd have to wrap our minds around in terms of how repressing something might be the individual's ability to control. Are we going to go with that meaning? Now, sometimes in medicine, we try to suppress something. We try to suppress fever. We might try to suppress cough or other things. So this may be about looking at what do you do to cool down this hot situation, this itis that's going on? Or does the individual need to, is the Six of Coins telling us that this person needs to pull away from stressful relationships and do something social? The Six has to do with the two paths, so there are choices involved. And six being, the two paths being Venus, mean that all of the sixes somehow are connected through music and art and drama and culture and beauty and love. Coins are intellectual. They do have to do with money. This might be telling us that the individual's ability to control the direction of their medical complaints is to spend some money on it. You might have to, cough up the money and go through a battery of tests. So now we move to the environment. What is affecting this? This card, which is shown up here, is Arcanum 8, the balance reversed. On one hand, if we're talking about physical environment or body, this is Capricorn, which is the area of the knees. So with the environment, we have to figure out, is this giving us some information about the zone of the body being affected? Or are these the environmental factors that can impact this person's health? And with this, the obvious thing about the scales is finding some balance, finding some equilibrium. So I believe the inner meanings to this are justice or equilibrium. So we would tell this individual that they need to find a healing environment where they can regain their balance. It looks like they've been, blowing out energy, which they may now need to, after a period of heightened activity, find a period of calm. So we move from that into the area of the opposition. And this is the Deuce of Scepters reversed, which is read as business pending on scientific measures. The inner meaning to this is exaltation. The way we determine that is either through looking at the two symbols in the upper corner, which shows it's the Leo decanate of Aries, but also this constellation, this long constellation, is the river Eridanus. And if we're looking at the opposition, I look at the river Eridanus as representing life force itself. And something's gone on where this person's life force may be on a dimmer switch. It's reversed. So something's gone on where they're not being as connected to that vital force, whether it's because it's winter and they're spending more time indoors and not getting sunlight and vitamin D and full spectrum light, whether it's the fact that they're not out in their garden touching the earth or having plants growing, or the technological side of this, the scientific method might mean that their work has them spending too much time in front of their computer and around electromagnetic frequencies and not around enough of the life force frequencies. So something is creating a dimming of their life force. That's what's in the opposition, that this individual has to get back in touch with that. And then the outcome here is the Queen of Swords reversed, which would represent a man of Virgo temperament. So Virgo rules what part of the body? The gut. And some medical theories believe that health starts in the gut. So one might discuss treatments that could be tied into diet. If we look at this from a medical perspective, Virgo governs greens and grains, basically food with a high fiber content, which usually is, helpful to one's gut unless they have terrible diverticulitis. Things like colon hydrotherapy might relate to that part of the body. But it also represents a man of Virgo temperament, which can have to do with science, with medicine. So this might represent looking for a physician, for a healer, for a dietitian, for a hydrotherapist, or somebody that's able to help them. Now for the disclaimer. One has to be very careful in certain areas of topics if you're working on them with clients. And one of those is you cannot give out medical advice unless you are a licensed medical practitioner. One cannot give out financial advice unless one is licensed. Unless you've gone through your broker's exams, you have to be very careful in terms of the way in which you give information, not necessarily specifically prescribing, but making some suggestions as to what direction the querent might look in. So let's summarize this. One of the things I like to do is look for patterns. And when I colored my cards, one of the things I did was I chose the dominant tone of the sign or planet so that there's a color theme. If I look at this, the fact that there are 2 8s here stand out. 8s can either represent energy in equilibrium or energy that is in stagnation or stasis of some kind. So that's something that has to be looked at here. If things have not become too stagnant or lethargic, there's no other number repeating itself. We don't see it in the color here. But we do have two 8s, which are the theme, which are finding balance but without finding stagnation. So that's health. Now, let's use the same cards. Let's play with interpretation here, and let's say the nature of the question that somebody is asking now has to do with their career. Somebody may come to you and say, I want to know what's going on in my workplace at this time. What surrounds me and for the next 4 months. So, the cards you'll be familiar with, I won't hold them up again. But again, if we look at the past of the matter, this is Arcanum 16. The Tower or the Lightning. What might this tell us about the past of the matter? Yeah, something's happened to be upsetting, which might be the reason they're asking you that question in the first place. You know, there's been some confrontation, conflagration, some conflict in the workplace, some tension, or somebody may feel like they're putting out a lot of energy but not seeing progress. They're spinning their wheels.
Seems to be more pay.
Right, that could be the draining experience or the fact that they've seen some people going. They could be anxious about their own position. So what we're doing here is we're just translating the symbolism but over to a new type of theme. We interpret the cards according to the subject matter that's being discussed. So, that gives us some setup. This is the background here. We might also ask, if we were looking at this from what type of work somebody does, again, what careers might be Mars-ruled? Anything martial, from the military to being a martial artist, or things which might have to do with surgery, with public safety, policing, fire department, emergency responders, but it can also govern people who work in construction, builders, welders, people who may be working with heat or tools of any kind. This could even be stretched to represent persons who might work in a health profession, such as bodybuilders or personal trainers. Would be a Mars type of energy. We could actually go down a whole laundry list of activities that might even give us some insight as to what the person's career could be. And if we look currently, what's going on? The Three of Swords, a separation. This could either represent the persons that have left the workplace, creating some kind of gap, or as extra work for you for no extra pay, that this gap in the workplace is creating some stress. So this could be due to a separation, or it could also be indicative that there's somebody in your workplace, a relationship that's gone south. You might be having to deal with someone who is actually an irritant to you. Don't know if this has ever happened to any of you before, but it is known to happen in the workplace. So we look to the future, which is a loss of honor. Talking about career, this card suddenly makes more sense to us in a business proposal than it might with health. Because the Eight of Swords could not only be a loss of honor, it could be the loss of one's job. So the reorg that's happening here, you may not have made the right friends that you need to, and you could be next on the list to get the axe. So this is somebody who might be actually feeling like the, who was it? Sword of Damocles is dangling over their head. You know, that I have a sense it's going to happen, but I don't know when. So, we want to be able to give some advice. And the thing to remember in doing readings is the goal isn't to wow and impress people with your psychic powers. It's actually to be helpful to them and to alleviate their suffering. That's what we do this for, is to just, help with some of the burden, whether it's actually the hardships one may be feeling or just the general anxiety about life. So looking at the ability to control the matter is very important. In this case, the Six of Coins reversed, which represents a social event, we might talk about it differently, such as maybe you need to go to the job fair, or you might want to announce to all your Facebook friends that you're interested and open to new employment. It may be a time of doing an inventory of your skills and looking creatively at how you want to market yourself at this time, and starting to refine your resume and getting it out to as many people as you know. Now, if we look for the environment, the 8, in this case, justice, equilibrium, the balance, generally would show some stability in the environment. Though, looking at the other cards thus far, there is no stability promised here. So, we might look at 8 from the perspective of, what are the legal protections here? Are there any, depending on the state in which you live and the nature of your contract would determine all of that. But this might also, since 8 Capricorn is at the top of the chart and governs the house of business, honor, and reputation, the important thing might be to leave the workplace with your reputation intact. And in this case, seeing if you can't get letters of reference from your boss, your superior, your human resource department, or someone else, which is basically, if everything else is being taken from you, you want to keep your reputation. If we look at what opposes it, now the Deuce of Scepters reverse, business pending on scientific measures, might mean something else. Perhaps this reorg is due to the fact that the work of many is now being done by machines, or computers, or new software, or new technology, or that they've brought robotics into the assembly line floor. And that could be standing in the way. Or it might be that the individual might have to think about brushing up on whatever the most common software is in use. Retraining, yeah. One might have to be rehabilitated, retrained in some ways. And then the outcome. In this case, Queen of Swords reverse, a man of Virgo nature. One of the advantages here is Virgo, in a natural chart, governs the 6th house of work and labor and employment. So we could look at this from that perspective, that this individual will, the outcome here is, this person will end up being employable. And this might even represent the person who employs them. The thing about the socializing here is that the larger the community you have, the more chance you have of being informed of opportunities. So do you get a sense of how the cards change according to the type of question? But things aren't really looking great for the future, because it looks here that you could become part of this, juggernaut of change that's going on, and that there could be a loss that happens. However, to mitigate this, the thing to do right now is your own inventory, redo your resume, look at all your skills, but also get connected socially, whether this is through your community, a virtual community, whether it's through job fair or, some other environment that allows you to connect and be tapped into opportunities. That it's very important to maintain a clear reputation at this time, not to get pulled into any inter-office, scandal, conflict, gossip, or problems. And also be really clear on the environment you want to look in for your next job. Again, be alert to any new skills or technological skills you need to add to yourself at this time, and that you'll end up employed. If I was using this as the timing card, Virgo for me would be the end of August through the first 3 weeks of September. So you might have a 6-month unemployment before finding the next perfect job. Timing is the heart, the astrological chart is great for determining time, but with the cards, you develop your own sense of time with that. And I've been pretty good with it, even to the point in the past of telling somebody the day their house would sell, and I've been off, sometimes by 2 years. I may get the month right, but not the year. So timing can be the challenge in all of this. Yeah, the word divination, actually in Romance languages, in Spanish, Portuguese, and French, means to guess. Yeah, adivinar means not only to foretell the future, but it also means you're guessing. So it's the same thing. It's just the process of the guessing for us, isn't just guessing. It's we're using symbols that are evoking information from our unconscious mind. Now, what about romance? I mean, what do people talk about? Health, work, love. These are the 3 biggies. So let's say somebody came to you and said, that's a very good insight, Michelle. The 8 of Swords, the loss of honor, could be going down a notch.
Because it's 2 8s, so there's some stability.
Right. One is indicating a stable environment, but the other is indicating that the chair's being kicked out from under you. So somebody comes to you and says, what surrounds my relationship at this time? And we turn this over and immediately get Arcanum 16, the lightning reversed. What's the first thing that's going to come to your mind? Have you had a fight or broken up recently? And they might go, yeah, we really had a knockdown, drag-out fight on Saturday night, and I think he may never be speaking to me again. And then we turn over the present, which is the 3 of Swords, which is a divorce or separation. And you might say to that person, well, at this point, it is looking pretty clear that the breakup you had on Saturday is real at this time. It looks like both parties are pretty determined about this. Let's skip to the future. 8 of Swords, a loss of honor. Well, maybe once you've broken up, your ever so helpful friends might come around and start gossiping and telling you that they actually saw him out 2 weeks ago with Mildred, having coffee at Starbucks. So what could happen here is the future in this isn't looking very promising for getting back together again. It actually looks like there could be further rancor or misunderstanding, or through the information of friends or insights that someone's character further devolves in your eyes. So they're asking you, what do I need to do about this? Six of Coins, I might say it's an important time for you to seek the support of your friends right now. You may be really clearly missing this relationship that ended in a very hostile way. And your friends might be friends are another form of relationship. And being connected to friends right now might offer you the succor or nurturing or distraction that you need. In this case, I'm not really tuning into someone and interpreting the visions, the feelings, the vocabulary, the images that I'm getting. I'm making stuff up, and this is my story. And that's what we do when we do a reading. Right. And if you're good, people will tell you you're on target with that. So yes, this could represent the individual. Maybe they discover that she was having the affair behind the scene, and she loses her honor that way. But in my story, I'm saying, no, friends are happy you've broken up here, and now they're telling you about all the deep, dark secrets. That's my story. Okay. And here's the environment, which is Arcanum 8. In this case, we discover they're actually married, and part of the divorce is going to be having to deal in the environment of the court of law. That there may be anything from a bifurcation of funds to actually having to do some type of detailed property settlement and determine who gets custody of the German Shepherd and the turtle. Let's see, the Deuce of Scepters in the opposition. How are we going to interpret this? Maybe you felt this person was sucking your life force, that you tried to have the relationship, but that it wasn't balanced, that you were feeling less alive rather than more alive. Or Deuce of Scepters might indicate that while still married to you, they were doing online dating, this being the card of technology. Again, I'm making stuff up. You're telling a story. And sometimes what I've discovered is the things I don't say are the things that come out later when they start talking about part of the reality. That might pop into my mind, and I don't say it because I think it's absurd, or it might cast a more deviant light on the partner. But in the conversation that ensues, they may start talking about that. Yeah, and I was going through the computer files, and I found he was on eHarmony. So the outcome? Well, I think she gets a new man. Here we have the Queen of Swords reversed. So a man of Virgo temperament.
How would you describe that to her?
I would say this is somebody who is probably going to be very hardworking, industrious, looks good in a frock.
A farmer.
Might have an extremely analytical mind and is always trying to evaluate things. In some areas could be very fastidious or organized. And at the extreme could, occasionally get derailed by focusing in on the negative, or, becoming critical, be it self-critical or critical of circumstances. But generally is very service-minded, and maybe somebody that you meet through volunteer work or a service activity. But for those of you students who aren't in the room, this is your chance to ask questions about any of the three interpretations we've done tonight. Hey, Michael.
What I wanted to ask is the card at the bottom of the trine, the power card, that would indicate the power the person has to perhaps to control the situation. So I was wondering with the Six of Coins that they could use that type of energy, which is six is the Venus energy, maybe to heal the risks in the work situation. I'm going back to the first question. What I'm really trying to get at is that is a way really of overcoming maybe a possible loss of employment by sort of creating harmony in the workplace.
Absolutely. And what's great about doing this is it really stimulates a lot of different perspectives that we can all learn from. And yes, because this spread shows that there's been alienation in the workplace, the Three of Swords, oftentimes there's a variety of reasons why people are hired and kept at work. One of those reasons is because they have great skill. And if somebody has great skill, oftentimes we will overlook their peculiarities and character flaws in order to benefit from that skill. There are other times where people may not be as highly skilled, but they have great teamwork abilities. They know how to be cooperative, collaborative. They are able to be self-directed and see the way in which they can lift the load of other people around them. And that's the pleasure principle. We want to hire those people because we smile when they walk into the workplace, or we get a sense of joy being around them. So as you pointed out, Michael, one way to look at this, and especially if we're going from the perspective suggested this might just be a demotion or a loss of title, what could the individual do? It's team building. It's to go back in and see where the rifts have been, see if there are fences that can be mended, and possibly being willing to volunteer on a committee and go out and build up, camaraderie through teamwork or a sport, or they may all be riding bicycles together to raise funds for MS by getting out in that social environment and doing something collaborative. You might be able to build up the relationships, because people will keep you in a workplace if they like you, if they feel strongly bonded to you. So I think that's a really good perspective. Yes, and that's a good question. I look at the court arcana from two different perspectives. Zane's method, as described in the Sacred Tarot, is that they almost exclusively represent persons external to ourselves. However, my life experience doing readings for 40 plus years informs me that the court arcana can sometimes represent facets of ourselves or our personality. So if we were to take this card and go back to the three different subjects, in health, this might mean that you have to take a more critical view towards your health. It may be important for you to start analyzing what you're eating, what you're doing, the energetic impacts of other people or your technology on how you feel, and becoming proactive in your own health future. Or we might say, if we're looking at this from the perspective of the workplace, evaluate how you can become a better worker. The thing is, for most of us, unless we have really powerful seventh houses, we tend to go through life focused in on our own experience. And we're not always inclined to put ourselves in the other person's shoes. But the process of doing that can be incredibly informative. And especially in the workplace, if you can think, if I was the employer, what would I want from my employee? What are the qualities? What is it that my existing employer is looking to gain from me? How can I be of better service? Well, one thing about bosses and superiors, they tend to find the employees that bring them troubles less desirable than the employees who look to lighten their load. So, looking at this from the service perspective, it's thinking about, okay, what can I do in the workplace that helps to maybe alleviate some of the burden that's on my superior or on some of the coworkers around me? I mean, except if it's in the case where you're so horribly overburdened. There might be little things that you can do that lifts up and lightens the load and allows you to be of service to others. Again, if we're looking at this from relationship, we've pretty much concluded that this relationship ain't getting better. But what can you do? The way I look at relationship is it can be like a schooling. And people go in for undergraduate degrees and people go in for graduate degrees. And so not to just throw the baby out with the bathwater, it's to look back at the relationship and decide, okay, what can I learn from the experience that went on, and how do I take this into my next relationship in a way that serves me and where I'm better informed about how to be in relationship with others. And that might come about through either, if we look at Virgo from the concept of service, I do believe that one knows true love in a relationship at that stage where they place the other person's needs above their own. And that's being of service. But the other thing is, part of doing well in a relationship is also being able to discern in the beginning, to have discernment or discrimination, which is one of the qualities of Virgo, those qualities of analysis, to be able to do your pro and con list and get a sense of, is this a relationship that is also going to serve me? Are the qualities here? Are the characteristics here? Are the habit systems in place here that this is actually something in the Virgo sense that is workable? I mean, the real answer is, the secret to a long marriage, you never divorce. And you just decide, in the Virgo sense, that there's always going to be some work going on there, unless it's something that's really horrible and abusive, and then you have to get out. Yeah, not with the malefics and you've got basically the only suit that's repeating itself here is swords. That's strife.
Two swords.
No, there's three.
Oh, yeah.
It's not getting better. But you can get better. I would advise the person to seek justice, not vindictiveness, and try to look for the fairest outcome for both persons involved, because generally in divorces, the only one who really benefits from it is the divorce attorney. So that's our time for tonight. Are there any other questions out there in the virtual world?
Thank you, Christopher.
You're welcome. All right, good night to you out there, all of you. And good night to those of you who are participating on Church of Light TV.